Well, in the last year, Bitcoin has changed really dramatically in the US at least. So, since the last time we were on, a US strategic Bitcoin reserve was established. Ross Ulbricht was freed from prison. Donald Trump, of course, was reelected president. And we crossed that pivotal price of 100,000 US dollars, which even just a few years ago seemed like a pipe dream. I would tell people that I was meeting, oh yeah, I think Bitcoin's going to cross $100,000, and they would look at me like I was crazy. Now, they definitely don't look at me uh, with that same type of skepticism, and I've had to revise my pitch and say, yeah, I think Bitcoin's going to go to 1 million one day. So the question was, what have I learned about Bitcoin? And I think the thing that I've learned the most over the last year is just that Bitcoin never does what you expect it to do. And maybe, I've learned that I've been in Bitcoin for quite a while, but it just feels like this year in particular, it's very true because of how optimistic the future is for Bitcoin. With all these things that have transpired, micro, strategy hitting 500,000 Bitcoin, U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve established, the operation, choke point things kind of falling to the wayside in the U.S. I would expect the price to be a lot higher, and it's been a muted cycle so far, although it has crossed that pivotal $100,000 price. So maybe that's not the most prophetic or profound thing that I've learned, but it's always surprising that just Bitcoin never does what I anticipated to do.
Yeah, it's super. And just because you said it, I thought about it. When I last year started, I had a space running where Sailor with Strategy B or MicroStrategy back then still had under 210,000 Bitcoin, and we were like, oh, will he get to like this 1% of the supply? And then like I don't know, maybe he'll get there this year. And it's so fascinating to see just this execution and these new ways of coming up with buying Bitcoin, and now like this crossing 500,000 Bitcoin on on the balance sheet. It's unbelievable actually for me, and it kind of shows how this cycle is like really big on institutions and retail, at least from what I see. Maybe you have other insights from Unchained. Retail is kind of sleeping on this cycle.
I definitely notice that the general public is still very asleep when it comes to Bitcoin. On the Unchained side of the house, we've surpassed some really major milestones in the last year. So Unchained helps long-term Bitcoin savers secure, manage, and grow their Bitcoin with a suite of financial services that are built on top of collaborative custody multi-signature, where clients control keys. And just in the last year, we surpassed 100,000 Bitcoin secured on the platform, and over 900 million US dollars of commercial loans originated. So some really major milestones that have we've crossed. And we help thousands and thousands and thousands of clients. So our client count has definitely grown a lot. But I do agree with you that, if you're walking down the street, Bitcoin is still regarded, people know about Bitcoin at this point, but there's definitely still that skepticism, or there's a lack of interest. And I'm not sure what it is that will pique their interest. I thought crossing $100,000 would have definitely moved the needle, but, and we did see a decent bump in new users when that milestone was crossed. But now that we're, 20% lower, I'm very surprised that we're not seeing more volumes. And volumes are good, but they're not, it's not like a major bull run volume.
People that watch my podcast all the time might be bored of that statistics, but I bring it up a lot. I really like to see at Google Trends, like with the search term buy Bitcoin, and see how it has been developing. And if you just compare that to 2021 and to especially 2017, we are crazy low, like 7% of where we were with December 2017. Then people bring up like, oh, nobody's searching anything anymore. But yeah, they look YouTube. And actually, it does make a difference. If you look at the YouTube volume, and YouTube is the biggest video platform currently, it is a little bit better where we currently are. Would be super fun also to see statistics of like ChatGPT and other AI tools that kind of come up with like, but they don't have that history of data. But it just shows me that the price currently is mostly driven, at least what I see, from institutions and retail, at least also from my like when I go on in the family where there's no Bitcoiner, they really don't care that Bitcoin hit 100K. Like they hit the new all-time high. We have seen it before. We heard it before. We still think it's bad for the environment.
Right. And I think the last time we recorded, either the ETFs had just released or they were just about to be released. And so, yeah, it's a totally different paradigm right now for Bitcoin. And I completely agree with you. The large institutions are purchasing Bitcoin at kind of an insane rate, to be honest, especially Strategy. They went from 200,000 Bitcoin to over 500,000 Bitcoin extremely quickly. And something that kind of keeps me up at night is all of these major institutions accumulating with quite a serious centralization of custodians, right? So most of the ETFs in the US use Coinbase for custody. Coinbase is becoming a larger and larger and larger honeypot for attackers. And, regardless of how amazing their security is, just having a single place that you can go and compromise to cause a catastrophic loss of Bitcoin is becoming, I think, a growing concern for me.
Is it a concern for the price action or actually also for Bitcoin itself?
Bitcoin will survive either way. And in fact, Bitcoin will emerge stronger if large centralized custodians are attacked and compromised, because alternative solutions like a network of keys, collaborative custody, multi-sig, self-custody become more and more obvious. And once those are adopted, Bitcoin becomes even more anti-fragile. So Bitcoin, I think, just in general, is a very anti-fragile form of money, where any sort of attacks might cause damage in the short term or slow adoption, but the people who stick it out and survive end up getting much more resilient and stronger. So even if, the largest custodians are attacked, I think it will set Bitcoin's adoption back a little bit, but Bitcoin will grow much stronger as a result of it, because every time a custodian like that runs into an issue, it teaches the market something really important, that, hey, Bitcoin doesn't work the same way as gold or the US dollar. Centralizing it and putting all the keys in control of one custodian or entity is just categorically less secure than leveraging the native properties of Bitcoin, multi-signature, with keys distributed. If keys were more distributed among different custodians, even if the individual himself isn't holding a key, then if exchange A is hacked and their key is compromised, 0 Bitcoin is lost, right? Compare that to today. If an exchange is attacked and compromised, significant funds are lost. Just a month or so ago, Bybit was hacked for $1.5 billion of, it was Ethereum, but it just goes to show that centralizing control of keys with a third party is not the ideal long-term solution for Bitcoin security.
Yeah, and from what I don't know if this is actually true. I never checked it, but I saw it in the news where they converted it to Bitcoin. So there was this like joke going on, like even criminals know you steal Ethereum, but you actually want the Bitcoin, not the Ethereum.
Yeah, criminals need money as well. Everybody needs money. Governments need money. people need money. Unfortunately, criminals also need money. And yeah, I do think, I mean, it makes sense that they would get rid of something that is hemorrhaging value measured in Bitcoin, um, and upgrade it to the world's best form of money. You know, while they're nefarious, they're not idiots, right? So they know what they're doing. And of course, they're going to want to store that value in the world's best form of money.
One thing that I didn't plan, but it's super interesting when we look at self custody, and then Unchained is doing self custody with their clients. Where do you think we will end up long term? I don't know if we actually talked about it last time, but it's super interesting because um, I have a really hard time convincing people of self custody. Both on my channel, around 50% of my channel is doing self custody, 50% not. But even more problematic is like if I get people to buy Bitcoin in real life, like friends and families, they feel really safe if they are exchanges. They trust in the institutions. Like it's Austria. Like they never experienced bank freeze or anything like that. They trust in the institutions and the governments that are in place, which I think is not a clever idea. But it's hard to convince someone of something else. Do you think self custody is something that can be mainstream? Of like, okay, over 50% of users will do it, or is it always for a side group of people that really want to enhance their own freedom and their sovereignty?
There's a lot to unpack in that question. So what I'll start with is by saying that even today, a vast majority of all of the Bitcoin out there that isn't lost is secured in self custody. So last time I checked, there was an estimated something 3 or 4 million Bitcoin with custodians. There's about 10 million Bitcoin, 10 to 12 million Bitcoin secured in self custody. And then, 3 to 4 million Bitcoin are lost. So I'm not going to do math on the fly here, but that equals roughly 20 million. And I think that surprises people. Most Bitcoin out there is under the control of, an individual's private keys. So if you when you get started, it looks the easiest to just set up an account with an exchange, because then you don't really have to learn anything, right? With your bank account, you just upload your information. They deal with all of the dollars or euros, gold, whatever you're securing with the bank, and you don't have to worry too much. Now, with Bitcoin, it's very problematic because Bitcoin is immutable, which means that if Bitcoin is sent to an address, there's no takebacks. And when you set up an account with an exchange, the most common way that people lose Bitcoin is by having their access to their account hacked. So if you're using an email address that, gets compromised, what attackers can do is get access to your email and then trick the exchange to send Bitcoin. Log in to the exchange, withdraw Bitcoin, or go through support channels and set up email kind of routing rules that send all the replies to a folder that you might not be aware of. And they can spend months and months doing that. So while setting up an account with an exchange might seem easy, what you're actually securing your Bitcoin with when you do that is your email account. So your email account better be extremely secure. Now, another way, that's one of the risks of working with an exchange. Another risk is the exchange themselves gets compromised, which happens probably every year, probably multiple times every year, in different exchanges, across different exchanges, and in different, especially in DeFi kind of fantasy land. Those are super insecure, but major custodians also run into problems. And so it's almost like a matter of time when it comes to custody. And so as long as as soon as your Bitcoin gets to a point where it's an amount that you really can't afford to lose, I really think you must look into self-custody. And there are ways to do it that are pretty straightforward. You can set up a mobile wallet on your phone, but what you really want to look at for long-term savings is cold storage, which is, either with a hardware wallet or with collaborative custody, which is multi-signature. And multi-signature is Bitcoin addresses that are built from multiple keys that require multiple keys to spend. So for example, 2 of 3, that's what we do at Unchained. The Bitcoin address is built with 3 keys, any 2 of which are needed to move the Bitcoin out of the address. Clients control 2 of the keys. Unchained has 1 of the keys. So if you lose one of your devices, then Unchained is there to step in to sign a transaction. And we found that that is an extremely resilient way to store Bitcoin for many years. While the setup might be a little bit more complicated than setting up an account with an exchange, it's really not that bad. Unchained guides clients through it day in and day out, every age, every technical ability. We've worked with clients in their 80s. We've worked with younger clients. We've worked with, self-professed Luddites, right? People who don't know how to use technology. And at the end of the day, if you can protect information decently well, like if you have a filing cabinet that you store your, in the US, we have social security numbers and passports, then you have a good chance of being able to successfully secure a key. It just requires, a little bit of learning. But if Bitcoin is really important to you, it's some of the most valuable learning that you can do. I like to tell people that it's easier than driving a car. Driving a car, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of rules. You're driving a piece of heavy equipment that could, malfunction. You could crash. With Bitcoin, you're writing down some words. You're storing those in a very secure place. And if you're using hardware wallets, you want to be doing kind of routine maintenance checks. So a couple times a year, plugging it in, making sure all the Bitcoin's there, making sure your device is up to date. Really not that challenging once you get over the learning curve.
I couldn't agree more. Like we do so many things that we didn't expect it. Like even on the technical side, how few people knew what an email is, how to log in, the password and usernames, how we use WhatsApp. All those things are learning curves for humanity. And I do hope actually on a larger scale that the public private key, the cryptography of it, hopefully gets to be more widely used. I think username and password is kind of a bad thing for security wise, and I would like to just use it in many more places. Just a quick side questions. Are you also doing 3 out of 5? And if not, why?
We currently only do 2 out of 3 multi-sig, and it's for a very specific reason. When we get clients set up, clients, like I said, have 2 keys, but each key is actually comprised of a hardware wallet and a seed phrase, right? So as a client, you have 4 items. Unchained has 1 item. You can lose 3 out of 4 of those items and still recover your Bitcoin. So you can lose both seed phrase and a device, and as long as you have 1 device, you can still recover your Bitcoin. We believe that securing seed phrases is foundational to Bitcoin security. So for every key that you want to have a device and a seed phrase. And that's because the hardware wallets themselves are points of failure. We've seen many times throughout the past where a firmware update goes wrong, or the manufacturer, introduces a new feature that is not compatible, where people might be locked out of signing transactions for a period of time. If you have that seed phrase, you can just load that seed phrase onto another device and be on your way. If you don't have a seed phrase, you're trapped. You have to wait until the functionality is available. So 2 of 3 is where we landed because, again, clients are securing 4 items. If we were to increase that to 3 of 5, it would just increase complexity pretty significantly, because you do need to, or you do want to, geographically separate as many of those items as possible. And finding 4 separate locations is already tough. And then increasing that, maybe with another 2 keys, if you want to hold 4 out of 5 keys, for example, just makes it even harder.
Yeah, it totally makes sense, especially with the seed phrase backup. It's then already almost like a 5 out of to set up, because like you need just one of two of those where you only have two keys, but like you have of one key two different items that can actually unlock either the hardware wallet with the pin or the seed phrase on its own. Then it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I would say there's some marginal additional security that you can get from 3 of 5, but that additional security comes with pretty significant additional operational complexity, right? Because you are having to find more secure locations, and then you have to periodically check on everything. You can't just like set Bitcoin and forget it. So you do want to make sure that at least once or twice a year, you're going and checking to make sure that you haven't been compromised. With multi-signature, if one item is compromised, it's not a big deal. You're not losing Bitcoin, but you do need to know so that you can move the Bitcoin into a new address where all of the items are safe.